A grounded billionaire with an unshakable spirit sits quietly on the steps of an old store, seeking solace after a grueling day. She never imagined that this brief pause would escalate into a tense encounter with an aggressive police officer. Mocking words, sneering looks, and rising threats make the air thick with hostility. Just as it seems that injustice will prevail yet again, a stranger steps forward. That stranger? None other than boxing icon Mike Tyson. With his commanding presence and firm resolve, Mike not only shields Vivian but sparks a chain of events that challenge the very core of the system. What unfolds next is a powerful testament to courage, compassion, and the fight for justice. Stand with us as we uncover this inspiring story, and don't forget to subscribe for more tales of hope, bravery, and kindness. Let us know in the comments where you're tuning in from. We love hearing your stories. Mike Tyson, the legendary former heavyweight champion, often seeks quiet corners of the city to recharge his spirit after rigorous training. Greenwood, a serene neighborhood shaded by lush green trees and lined with charming stone steps, is his sanctuary. It's here that Mike sheds his public persona, becoming just a man enjoying the world's simple pleasures. That afternoon, Greenwood Street shimmered under the warm, golden light of the setting sun. Mike strolled down the path, basking in the rare tranquility that he valued so much. He wore simple sportswear and a low-brimmed cap, intentionally blending into the crowd. In that moment, the pressures of being a boxing legend seemed to melt away, leaving a plain Mike seeking peace. As he passed by a small closed shop, he heard loud voices coming from ahead. At first, Mike didn't pay much attention, thinking it was just a minor argument. But the voices grew louder, carrying a harsh and angry tone. He slowed his pace, his sharp eyes turning toward the source of the noise. There, just a few dozen steps away, a police officer was standing in front of a woman of color. The woman was dressed simply, sitting peacefully on the stone steps. But the officer's eyes were full of contempt and anger. He stood aggressively, pointing his finger at the woman, his voice harsh. "This is not a place to sit. This is a decent neighborhood, not a place for vagrants like you." Mike stopped, his gaze instantly turning icy. He carefully observed the situation. The woman, though appearing ordinary, remained calm despite the officer's rude words. She lifted her head, her voice firm but not raised. "I'm just taking a little rest. I haven't done anything wrong." The police officer, clearly dissatisfied with her response, took a step closer. His tone became more threatening. "I'm the one who decides what's right or wrong, and I'm telling you, you're not allowed here." Then, to assert his authority, the officer suddenly bent down and shoved the woman roughly. The push sent her stumbling, almost causing her to fall, but she maintained her balance and looked up defiantly into his eyes. Mike felt his blood boil. The image reminded him of his younger days when he was looked down upon because of his skin color and poor background. Memories of the injustices he endured surged back, fueling his anger. But Mike didn't rush in. He knew he needed to stay calm. With his tall stature and strong presence, even a small action could have a significant impact. He quickly approached them, each step growing more determined as he saw the officer continue to advance on the woman, his mocking voice loud. "Seems like you don't understand how things work here," he said. "Let me teach you a lesson about obeying the law." At that moment, Mike's strong and deep voice cut through the tense atmosphere. "Let her go. Now." Both the woman and the officer turned around. The woman looked stunned, but a glimmer of hope quickly appeared in her eyes. The officer instinctively took a half step back upon seeing Mike. With his large build, strong arms, and eyes burning with the desire to eliminate injustice, Mike stood there like an iron tower, dominating the surrounding space. The police officer quickly regained his fake confidence, trying to maintain a stern expression. "This isn't your business. You'd better keep walking if you don't want any trouble." Mike smirked, a half smile full of defiance. "Trouble? Do you think I'm afraid? But I'm not here to fight. I'm here to ensure she's treated by the law, and you won't lay a finger on her again." The police officer glanced at Mike once more, now unable to hide his worry. Mike Tyson was not just a legend. He was a symbol of strength and courage. His reputation made the officer realize that if this incident got exposed, his career would be over. He released the woman reluctantly, stepping back with a threatening tone. "I'll remember this, but don't think I'll always be here to protect her." Mike didn't respond, silently watching as the officer walked away, his eyes still full of resentment. Once he left, the woman sat back on the steps, letting out a sigh of relief. Mike approached her, gently placing his hand on her shoulder. "Are you okay? I couldn't just stand by and watch such injustice happen." The woman looked up, her eyes full of gratitude. "Thank you. I thought I was completely alone." Mike smiled, his eyes softening, but his voice still resolute. "No one deserves to be treated that way. Don't worry, you're not alone in this." In that moment, Mike knew that his peaceful afternoon had turned into a small but crucial battle, a fight for justice and compassion. Mike Tyson stood silently for a moment, watching Officer Walker approach the patrol car. But Walker didn't leave as Mike had hoped. He stopped by the car, opened the door, and said something to the colleague inside. The car closed, and another officer got out, a tall, stern-faced man. Both turned back, this time with clear determination, as if willing to prove their authority at any cost. The woman of color sat on the nearby steps, her hands trembling as she tried to stay calm. Though her face still showed determination, fear began to flicker in her eyes. She knew the situation wouldn't end easily. Walker and his partner approached, their faces full of threats. They no longer concealed their abusive intentions. Walker pointed at the woman, his voice aggressive and provocative. "Did you think someone like him could protect you forever? This is my area, and I decide who's allowed here. You're obstructing police work. If you don't leave immediately, we'll arrest you for obstructing law enforcement." Mike stepped forward, standing between Walker and the woman like a steel wall blocking injustice. He leaned slightly forward, his eyes fixed on Walker, his voice deep and authoritative. "She hasn't done anything wrong. I've been here and witnessed everything. All you're doing is harassing an innocent person. If you try to arrest her, I'll do everything to ensure this doesn't go away. The media, the public, all will know." Walker hesitated for a moment at Mike's words. But immediately he smirked, trying to hide his irritation. "You think I'm scared? Mike Tyson, a boxer? You're no longer in the ring, and that means you have no right to interfere in this matter." The officer, walking with Walker, seemed less talkative, but his cold eyes swept over Mike and the woman, asserting his authority. He pulled a pair of handcuffs from his belt, pointing at the woman. "You're coming with us to answer a few questions. If not, we'll have to use force." The woman trembled, but Mike didn't back down. He took another step, fully shielding her, his voice rising strongly, each word like a punch against abuse. "Use force. You have no right to do this. I will be a witness, and I'll ensure you pay if you go any further." The determination and dignity in Mike made the other officer hesitate. However, Walker still refused to give up. He stepped closer, trying to intimidate Mike with a fierce attitude. "I don't care who you are. This is my area, and I decide what's right and wrong. Don't think I can handle you just because you're famous." Mike smirked, the familiar half-smile appearing as if facing an opponent in the ring. He slightly bowed his head, his face almost touching Walker's, his voice deep and weighty. "If you think you're strong enough to handle me, go ahead. But remember, this isn't a fight. It's about justice, and I won't back down. If you continue to harass, you'll face not only me, but also public opinion out there." The surrounding people, who had only been observing from a distance, now began to approach. A few pulled out their phones to record videos. Mike glanced quickly at the forming crowd, knowing their presence would only make Walker more agitated. Walker turned to his colleague, whispering something. Clearly, he was hesitant. The colleague whispered back, his voice low but audible to Mike, "Walker, this is Mike Tyson. If he makes a big deal out of this, we'll be in serious trouble." Walker gritted his teeth, his eyes flashing with anger as he realized the situation was spiraling out of control. But he still tried to maintain a stern face, turning back to look at Mike with a threatening tone. You win this time, but don't think it's over. She needs to be careful. There won't always be someone to stand up for her. Mike kept his gaze fixed on Walker, not responding. His silence carried more weight than any threat. Walker angrily turned away, along with the other officer, walking away as the patrol car slowly rolled away and disappeared around the corner. Once they were gone, the woman took a deep breath, trying to regain her composure. Mike turned back, gently placing his hand on her shoulder. His voice softened but remained determined. Are you okay? They can't do anything more now. The woman looked up at Mike, her eyes still a bit dazed but full of gratitude. I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't shown up. Thank you. Truly. Thank you. Mike gently shook his head, offering a light smile without losing his seriousness. No need to thank me. You didn't do anything. You didn't do anything wrong, and no one deserves to be treated that way. But we're not done yet. They won't give up. We need to clarify this matter. The woman looked at him, worry in her eyes. You mean I should sue them? I don't know if I can. Mike nodded, his eyes full of determination. Exactly. You're not alone. I'll stand by your side and I'll make sure they are held accountable. At that moment, a few people from the crowd approached, showing signs of support. A man said, I've recorded everything. If you need to sue them, I'm ready to testify. Mike smiled, feeling the support spreading. He looked at the woman, her eyes now shining with hope. Mike knew this wasn't just a street confrontation. It was the beginning of a larger battle. A fight against abuse of power and injustice. Mike Tyson left the street with Vivian Sinclair. Through brief conversations along the way, Mike learned that Vivian wasn't an ordinary woman. She was a female billionaire who had built her career from scratch. Despite her success, she chose to live simply, away from the glitz and glamour. This made Mike respect her even more, but also fueled his anger at how she was treated solely based on her appearance and skin color. Vivian recounted, her voice deep but still steady, I grew up in a tough neighborhood. I faced every challenge to rise up. But not everything changed. No matter who I am or what I've achieved, I'm still seen as someone unworthy of sitting in that peaceful street corner. Mike remained silent, his eyes showing empathy. He understood that feeling well, as he had also been a victim of prejudice and injustice throughout his youth and even at the peak of his fame. When they arrived at the office of lawyer Selena Mills, a trusted friend of Mike's, they were immediately greeted. Selena was a renowned lawyer, not only for her talent, but also for her strong fighting spirit for justice. She always took on difficult cases, especially those involving discrimination and abuse of power. As Mike recounted the entire incident, Selena listened seriously, her sharp eyes analyzing every detail. After Vivian finished her story, Selena leaned back in her chair, her hands clasped in front of her. Walker, she said, her voice deep and thoughtful, I've heard about him. He's notorious in the police system, not for his talent, but for his actions beyond his authority. But no one dared to stand up to him. This case isn't just about him personally. It's a reflection of a systemic problem. If we want to win, we have to turn this lawsuit into a major battle. Vivian looked up, a hint of confusion in her eyes. When you say major battle, what do you mean? Selena gave a slight smile, but her voice was firm. We're not just suing Walker. We're demanding a comprehensive investigation into police abuse within the system. They have to pay for what they did to you and all other victims. Mike, still leaning against the wall, nodded in agreement. I'll use my reputation to draw attention. But I need you to lead. I'm good at facing opponents in the ring, but in the legal battle, I trust you. Selena looked at both of them, her eyes filled with determination. Good. First, we need evidence. Mike, you're a key witness. But I need more testimonies, more information about Walker's behavior. At the same time, prepare yourselves mentally. They'll retaliate. They'll attack both your reputation and Vivian's. They'll dig into your past to weaken our case. Vivian took a deep breath, her eyes no longer showing the initial fatigue. Instead, her resolve became clear. I've faced worse things. They can attack me, but I won't back down. This isn't just for me. It's for everyone who's been treated unjustly without a voice. Selina nodded, a satisfied smile appearing on her lips. Then, let's get started right away. Mike decided that the public would be their strongest weapon. He didn't take long to reach out to familiar reporters, those willing to bring the story to light. Just a few hours later, news of Mike Tyson's intervention in the police harassment case spread across social media and major media outlets. Public opinion exploded. Headlines like Mike Tyson confronts abuse of power or boxing legend protects female billionaire from discrimination appeared everywhere. Vivian wasn't used to this sudden attention. Previously, she always kept her private life under wraps, but now she understood that to win, she needed to accept the spotlight. Her story was not just about herself, but also a symbol for those who had suffered injustice. As the news spread, an unexpected person reached out to their group, Officer Grant, a former colleague of Walker. Grant came to Selina's office looking tense. He wore a police uniform, but his demeanor showed he was carrying a heavy burden. After a brief greeting, he began to speak. I used to work with Walker. I know what he's like. He abused his power many times, especially against the vulnerable who couldn't protect themselves. But I stayed silent. I thought if I didn't say anything, I'd be safe. Mike placed a hand on Grant's shoulder, his eyes cold, but his voice warm. But now, you've decided to speak up. That's the most important first step. Grant nodded, remorse evident in his eyes. I saw what you did, what she endured. I can't stay silent anymore. I'm willing to testify. I'll tell everything I know. Selina couldn't hide her satisfied smile and immediately asked Grant for details about Walker's abuse of power. Through Grant's account, the full picture of corruption within the police system became clear. Walker not only harassed civilians, but was also involved in more serious misconducts. After Grant left, Selina looked at Mike and Vivian. This is a major breakthrough. With his testimony, we not only have a chance to win the lawsuit, but also to push for a broader investigation. Vivian, now regaining her confidence, spoke firmly. They'll fight to the end, but I'm not afraid. I've come too far to turn back. Mike smiled, gently patting her shoulder. You're not alone. We've started this fight, and we'll see it through. That day, in the twilight of the city, the three of them, Vivian, Mike, and Selina, knew this was just the beginning. A major battle awaited, but they were ready to face it. Mike Tyson and Selina Mills all knew that the upcoming legal battle wouldn't be easy. After obtaining Officer Grant's agreement to testify, things seemed clearer. But at the same time, pressure and resistance from Walker and the police system increased. Selina plunged into work with incredible determination. She asked Vivian to recount the entire story, from the first moments on Greenwood Street steps to the moment and taken to the police station by Walker. Every detail was recorded, analyzed, and connected into a cohesive narrative. Selina understood that, in a case like this, not only the truth, but also how it was presented played a crucial role. Vivian, Selina said during a tense meeting that lasted hours, was a woman of honor, trust, and public image. The opposition won't hesitate to attack you from all sides. Vivian nodded, her eyes unwavering. I know. They might dig into my past, but I have no regrets about anything I've done. I'm ready to face them. What I can't stand is letting them continue to abuse their power without punishment. Mike smiled from the corner of the room, proud of Vivian's resilience. You're right, he said, his voice warm but firm. They targeted the wrong person to threaten. With Selina leading, Anna supporting, they won't easily get away with this. Selina didn't just work with Vivian. She began to expand the scope of the investigation. She reached out to potential witnesses, including those who had worked with Walker. Some were hesitant. But upon learning that Mike Tyson was also standing for justice, they gradually became more open. Officer Grant became a key player, providing detailed information about Walker, from his abuse of power against civilians to shady activities Walker was involved in, investigating. Grant recounted during a meeting, Walker wasn't just a power-abusing officer. He knew how to exploit the system to cover up all his wrongdoings. I once saw him harass a boy just because the boy didn't look him in the eye properly. But all complaints were dismissed or disappeared. Mike, sitting quietly and listening, couldn't contain his anger. He clenched his fists, and he said, "That's exactly why we have to do this. No one has the right to treat others like that." Meanwhile, Selena began planning a crucial move. Going public with the lawsuit through the media. She believed that public opinion was their strongest ally. A press conference was organized in downtown, attracting dozens of reporters from major news agencies. Both Mike and Vivian were present. And their presence immediately made the event the center of attention. Vivian stepped up to the podium, feeling everyone's eyes on her. She took a deep breath and began to speak, her voice steady and resonant. "I stand here today not just for myself. I stand here for everyone who has ever been treated unfairly, who has been abused but had no opportunity to speak out. This is not a personal issue. This is a systemic problem, and it's time for us to change." Mike stood behind Vivian, his eyes full of pride. He knew that Vivian was not only a resilient woman, but also becoming a symbol of the fight against injustice. When Selena spoke, she emphasized, Walker is not the only case. We have evidence from multiple witnesses about abuse with the name of Vivian. This is not an isolated lawsuit. This is the first step in exposing the truth. Their words quickly spread. The press, social media, and public opinion all erupted. But not long after, Walker's side retaliated. A series of articles emerged, accusing Vivian of using the case to boost her own profile. Some commentators suggested she was merely seeking attention for the sake of her own safety. Others said she was just trying to gain more personal gain. These rumors and criticisms spread rapidly, attempting to undermine the support Vivian was receiving. Vivian remained undeterred. She continued working with Selena to strengthen the lawsuit. Meanwhile, Mike used his reputation to garner additional support. He appeared on interview shows, openly condemning the abuse and defending Vivian. This isn't a bust. This isn't about reputation or money. Mike said in an interview, this is about justice. No one, whether a billionaire or a homeless person, deserves to be treated that way. Meanwhile, people who had been victims of Walker began to come forward. Some approached Selena, providing testimonies and evidence of his wrongdoing. Their stories, each covering different aspects, combined to create a comprehensive picture of the corruption within the system that Walker was a part of. Before the court date, the team gathered at Selena's office. Outside the window, city lights sparkled, but no one in the room paid attention to them. They focused on the documents, testimonies, and strategies for the next day. Vivian sat across from Selena, listening to every piece of guidance. Mike stood beside her, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You're ready," Mike said, his voice deep but confident. "Tomorrow, you won't just be standing up for yourself, but for everyone who can't speak out. Remember, you're not alone. We're always here, facing whatever comes with you." Vivian looked up, her eyes shining with determination. "I know. This is the fight I've prepared my whole life to face." That night, no one in the group truly rested. But they all understood that tomorrow would be the day they wrote a new chapter in this story. A chapter about justice, perseverance, and change. Morning sunlight shone down on the city courthouse, which had become the focal point of the nation. Hundreds of people, from reporters and supporters to curious onlookers, had gathered outside waiting for the trial, a police officer accused of abuse of power. Inside the car, Vivian Sinclair took a deep breath, her hands tightly gripping her thighs. She was not only facing this trial for herself, but for all those who had been treated unfairly. As the car door opened, Vivian stepped out, wearing a simple black suit that exuded confidence and strength. Mike Tyson walked beside her, his large frame like a tower shielding her from all pressures. Selena Mills, Vivian's lawyer, followed closely, carrying a thick stack of documents in her hands, her sharp face revealing no signs of worry. Outside the courthouse, a noisy crowd cheered as they appeared. Supporters held up banners with slogans like "Justice for Vivian," "Fight abuse of power," and "The police are not kings." The resounding cheers filled Vivian with strength. She paused for a moment, looked at the crowd and smiled. Mike leaned towards her and whispered, "They believe in you. Let them see that they are right." Vivian nodded and walked toward the main entrance of the courthouse. The nervousness in her heart was quickly overshadowed by determination. She had been through too much to back down now. Entering the courtroom, the atmosphere became even more tense. The room was packed with people, from the jury and reporters to those following the case. On the other side, Bryce Walker sat at the defendant's table with his team of lawyers. His face was cold, his eyes sharp as knives, but there was evident tension in his movements. The judge entered and pounded the gavel to declare the opening of the session. Selina stood up, walked to the center of the room and glanced over the jury. Her voice rang out powerfully, "Your Honor, this case is not just a personal story. It's about accountability, about the abuse of power by someone entrusted with authority to protect, but instead used it to oppress. This is about ensuring that no one, whether a billionaire or a homeless person, deserves to be treated unjustly." The courtroom fell silent, all eyes fixed on Selina. "We will prove that Bryce Walker's actions were not merely mistakes, but a pattern of abusive behavior covered up by an unaccountable system. Vivian Sinclair is not the first victim, but she is determined to be the last." After Selina's compelling opening, the trial moved into presenting evidence and witnesses. The first witness called was Vivian. She walked up to the witness stand, standing tall, her eyes determined, despite knowing that every word she spoke would be scrutinized. Vivian recounted in detail that day, how she sat on the steps, quietly contemplating, how Walker approached her with contemptuous eyes and tone, how he pushed her and forced her to leave. Her voice was steady, each word clear, as if she were engraving her story into everyone's minds in the room. Walker's lawyer stood up to begin cross-examination. He tried to undermine Vivian's testimony by asking sarcastic questions. "Did you do anything to provoke Mr. Walker? Or do you think sitting there, dressed plainly, was a way to instigate?" Vivian held his gaze firmly, not blinking. "I was just sitting there, thinking. If that's considered provoking, then I don't know what else Mr. Walker sees as a threat." Her response caused murmurs in the courtroom. A few jurors nodded subtly, seemingly in agreement with her. Walker, sitting at the defendant's table, clenched his fists, his eyes showing undisguised anger. The next witness was Mike Tyson. His appearance nearly caused a stir. Mike walked up to the stand. His large stature, confident demeanor, and determined eyes commanding attention. He recounted what he had witnessed, how Walker approached Vivian, how he pushed her, and the evident aggression in his behavior. When Walker's lawyer cross-examined, trying to diminish Mike's testimony, he remained unshaken. "Do you think Vivian Sinclair did anything wrong?" the lawyer asked, attempting to sound sarcastic. Mike looked him straight in the eye, his voice firm and loud. "No, she didn't do anything wrong. But Walker did. He abused his power to threaten an innocent person, and I couldn't stand by and watch that happen." Mike's powerful voice silenced the courtroom. His honesty and straightforwardness not only grabbed attention, but also compelled the jury to listen intently. The final witness was Officer Grant, a former colleague of Walker. He stepped up to the stand looking tense, but determined. Grant recounted everything, from witnessing Walker's abuse of power, to how he had remained silent out of fear. "But when I saw what Walker did to Vivian, I knew I couldn't stay silent any longer. I had to speak the truth." Grant revealed specific details, from Walker's unnecessary use of force against innocent people, to how he had covered up his actions by exploiting the system. These testimonies were a fatal blow to Walker, leaving him unable to maintain his composure. As the jury deliberated, the atmosphere in the courtroom grew more tense than ever. Vivian sat beside Selina and Mike, her hands clasped tightly on the table, but her eyes remained steadfast, knowing that the truth had been exposed. Finally, when the jury returned, The courtroom held its breath. One member stood up and read the verdict aloud. "We, the jury, find the defendant, Bryce Walker, guilty of abuse of power, unlawful use of force, and illegal detention." The courtroom erupted in cheers and applause. Walker sat motionless, his face pale, unable to believe what had just happened. Vivian turned to Selena and Mike, tears streaming down her cheeks. But they were not tears of weakness, but of relief and liberation. Outside the courthouse, the crowd cheered as Vivian was welcomed. She paused in front of the reporters, her eyes shining brightly. "Today, we proved that justice is not something out of reach. But this is just the first step. I hope that from this case, we will continue to fight for change, to ensure that no one has to go through what I did." Applause echoed as Vivian, Mike, and Selena descended the courthouse steps. Under the brilliant sunlight, they understood that they had accomplished something great. More importantly, they knew that the journey was not over. This was just the beginning for a fairer future. After the trial, the light of justice seemed to shine down on Vivian Sinclair's life. But she knew it was only the beginning. This victory had exposed Bryce Walker's abuse of power. But the system that tolerated people like him remained intact. Vivian, Selena Mills, and Mike Tyson were united in their determination to elevate the movement demanding police system reform to a new level. In the days following the trial, Vivian took time to rest and recover mentally. Although she always appeared confident and strong on the outside, internally, the emotional wounds and public pressure left her exhausted. Mike Tyson, with a sensitivity few knew about, frequently called and visited her. "Vivian, you've come so far. Do you know? Not just me, but millions out there are looking up to you as an inspiration." Mike's words of encouragement helped Vivian regain her focus. One evening, she sat in the living room, the dim light from the city lamps filtering through the large window frames. She looked out, where the whole world was moving non-stop, and wondered how to turn her victory into real change. A week later, she, Mike, and Selena met again at Selena's law office. On the table were dozens of documents related to similar lawsuits, cases that had been forgotten or covered up within the local police system. Selena, always sharp and determined, began, "We need to capitalize on the momentum from this lawsuit. Bryce Walker is just a very small part. There are dozens, hundreds of similar cases that have been buried. Now is the time to put pressure on the entire system." Vivian looked at the documents in front of her, her eyes lighting up. "We need to act now. I want to turn this story into a movement, a comprehensive campaign not only to expose the truth, but also to protect those who have been treated unfairly." Mike leaned back in his chair, his large hands folded over his chest, his voice resonant. "I'll help you. Whether it's rallying the media, participating in talks, or even marching in the streets, I'm ready. We need to show everyone that this isn't just Vivian Sinclair's story. This is our story." Selena nodded, beginning to make detailed plans. "I will reach out to non-governmental organizations and human rights activists. We need allies. At the same time, I will request an independent investigation into the local police force, compelling them to bring transparency to past allegations." The very next day, the campaign named Justice for All was officially launched. The campaign quickly garnered support from social activist groups, human rights organizations, and ordinary citizens. Mike Tyson took on the role of the media liaison, appearing in interviews and talks to spread the message. "We can't let people like Walker continue to abuse their power to oppress others. If we don't stand up, who will?" Vivian became the face of the movement. In every speech, she not only recounted her own story, but also called for action. This system needs to change. We are not just demanding justice for one individual. We are demanding fairness for everyone, regardless of who they are, where they come from, or what they have. As the campaign grew, pressure from opponents also increased. Some conservative groups accused Vivian's movement of attacking the honor of the police. Newspapers invaded her privacy, trying to discredit her in the media. But Vivian did not let these things deter her. In a television interview, she responded strongly, "We are not against the police. We are against abuse of power. A good system will not fear oversight and reform. A system that only protects the wrongdoers is a system that needs to change. Meanwhile, Selena and her team uncovered more cases of abuse within the police force. A major front-page article in a national newspaper exposed how complaints were often ignored or sunk internally. These stories further empowered the movement, stirring public opinion even more. Mike continued to stand beside Vivian, participating in workshops and events. In a talk with university students, he shared, "Justice isn't something you can wait for others to deliver. You have to stand up and fight for it. I did that in the ring. Now I'm doing it in real life because it's what truly matters." Growing public pressure forced the local government to initiate an independent investigation into the police force. The investigation not only confirmed Walker's misconduct, but also revealed similar cases involving other officers. Several officers were suspended and initial reforms were proposed, including the establishment of an independent oversight body and the restructuring of how complaints are handled. At a major press conference, Vivian, along with Selena and Mike, stood before hundreds of reporters. Flashing lights continuously popped as Vivian stepped up to the podium. Her voice rang out powerfully, "We have made significant progress, but this is just the beginning. I hope that from my case, all of us will continue to fight to ensure that justice is not just a concept, but a reality." That evening, after the press conference, with only the three of them left in Selena's small office, the group sat together, quietly looking at one another. Selena smiled, her eyes full of pride. "We've accomplished something great, but the road ahead is still long." Mike nodded. "That's right. A fight can end, but justice is not something we stop fighting for. This is just the first round." Vivian looked out the window, where the city lights shone brightly in the dark night. "We've made a change. But I won't stop until everyone feels safe and respected, no matter who they are." That night, under a star-filled sky, they knew their journey had entered a new phase. The fight for justice was no longer an individual story, but had become a social movement. And they were ready to keep moving forward, not stepping back even by a single step. Months passed, and the reform movement led by Vivian Sinatra and Claire spread not only in her city, but nationwide. Discussions about abuse of power and police system reform were brought to political forums, featured in major speeches, and followed by millions on social media. Vivian, Selena Mills, and Mike Tyson became icons of change, each playing their own role, but united in a common mission. In a meeting with social activists, Vivian received important news. The independent investigation that her movement had pushed for officially concluded that, in addition to Bryce Walker, at least 15 other officers in a local police force were accused of abuse of power, and these individuals were facing legal penalties. Notably, the police department committed to comprehensive reforms, including the establishment of an independent oversight committee and mandatory retraining for the entire force. When this information was released, a wave of support poured in from all directions. Those who had previously hesitated to speak up now felt encouraged. Communities that were frequently treated unfairly now had hoped that their voices would be heard. One evening, as Vivian was sitting in her office, Mike Tyson walked in, carrying a box of pizza and 2 bottles of fruit juice. "Did you know you've become a national phenomenon?" Mike said, placing the box on the table. "I just read an article calling you the woman changing the law." Vivian laughed, shaking her head. "That's strange. I never thought my story would go that far. But this isn't my success alone, Mike. You and Selena have always been by my side." Mike shrugged, grabbing a slice of pizza. "Don't be so modest, Vivian. You've led the way. But I agree with you, this is just the beginning." At the same time, Selena walked in, carrying a thick stack of documents. "I have good news," she said, sitting down across from Vivian. "We've convinced the federal government to consider making these reforms national policy. Not just in one city, but all police departments across the country will have to comply with new transparency and accountability regulations." Vivian looked up, surprised. "Really? This could change everything?" Selena smiled, nodding. "Yes, but we need to keep the pressure. Otherwise, everything could easily be forgotten." In the following weeks, Vivian continued to appear at national forums. She spoke about the importance of transparency and accountability in the legal system and how communities need to stand up against injustice. Mike Tyson, with his enormous influence, also kept calling for action. In a speech at a major university, he said, "Justice is not a luxury. It's a basic right for everyone. But this right won't exist if we don't fight to protect it." As for Selena, she kept working behind the scenes, continuing to pursue new lawsuits, protect other victims, and use her legal expertise to drive systemic changes. A year after the trial concluded, Vivian stood on the stage of an international human rights conference. Behind her were large banners that read, "Justice for all. The journey continues." She looked down at the auditorium where hundreds of people were attentively listening. They were activists, leaders, and ordinary citizens, people inspired by her story. "We have achieved so much," she said, her voice strong and clear. "But the road ahead is still long. Justice isn't something you achieve once and forget about. It's an ongoing journey that requires courage, perseverance, and the unity of all of us. I hope that each person here will continue to fight, not only for themselves, but for those who cannot speak up." The entire auditorium stood up, applause resounding continuously. Mike and Selena, sitting in the front row, looked at Vivian with undisguised pride. They knew their journey had left a deep mark, not only on the legal system, but also in the hearts of people who longed for fairness. As Vivian stepped off the stage, a young girl approached her, her eyes bright with inspiration. "Miss Sinclair, your story changed my life. I want to become a lawyer so I can help vulnerable people just like you have." Vivian smiled, placing her hand on the girl's shoulder. "You have the strength within you. Never stop believing in justice. You can change the world." That night, as the three of them sat together in a small restaurant on a street corner, they looked back on the journey they had taken. Mike, with a mischievous smile, raised his juice glass. "We've done something extraordinary, but I bet Vivian isn't satisfied yet, right?" Vivian laughed, her eyes shining. "No, I still have a lot to do, but at least I know we've proven one thing. Justice isn't out of reach. If we are brave enough to stand up, it can become a reality." Outside the window, the city glowed under the lights, a reminder that even in darkness, the light of justice always exists. And their journey, though they had achieved great accomplishments, would continue because better things were still ahead. The story of Vivian Sinclair, Mike Tyson, and Selena Mills is not just a battle against injustice, but also a reminder that the power of courage, unity, and belief in justice can change an entire system. Through their challenging journey, they proved that, even in the face of oppression, everyone has the ability to stand up, protect their values, and contribute to building a fairer society. Vivian did not let herself be stifled by fear or injustice. She turned her pain into motivation, and with the support of companions like Mike and Selena, she created a reform movement that touched millions of hearts. Their story teaches us that, no matter where we are or what circumstances we face, if we stand together, nothing is impossible. Vivian's journey is a call to all of us. Speak up for those who cannot, fight for the values we believe in, and never let fear prevent you from standing on the side of what is right. Because justice is not a privilege, it is the right of everyone. If this story has touched you, continue to spread these meaningful messages. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next inspiring story. Together, we can build a better world where justice, kindness, and hope always exist.